It's podcadzo.
Hey, 222. All right, I have both sides, and these sound better. I'm gonna use these for this ode. I hope my headphones are okay.
Yeah, me too.
I love those. I've had them forever. Hope they're not broken.
What kind of headphones are they?
They're old Sony. I forget the exact model, but some classic Sony ones.
Nice. All right.
Welcome back to Podcadzo, the internet's leading music podcast
Slosh. Fucking dipshit.
Welcome back to Podcadzo, the internet's leading music podcast talk show. Stroke. That's what British people call slashes.
Instead of slash? Ew. No wonder they're fucking falling off the face of the earth.
Are they?
In my mind.
All right. We talk about them a lot, British people.
You do.
I do. I'm obsessed with them.
You can't
What you
stop.
call an Anglophile?
Well, you were somewhere not necessarily British, but it might as well be British.
People who worship the British even more than I do, Canadians. And I was in their homeland, Canada.
How was it?
It was a lovely trip. My family lives out there in Ontario.
I just picture a lot of tobogganing happening.
Not this time of year, but during the winter, certainly.
Any time of
I actually
year,
went to
really.
a brewery called Toboggan Brewing Company.
That's close enough.
And they had a bunch of toboggans there.
It's close enough for me.
But it was good. I went to horse race, which was the first time I've done that.
Did some gambling.
Did some gambling, lost some money, but made it back up at the casino right afterwards.
Oh, nice.
Playing the slots.
Well, that doesn't
So that was
happen to
all right.
everyone.
Yeah, so I just barely broke even that night.
Good for you.
Yeah, I think gambling is really going to work out for me. I think if I just keep
If
going
you stick
and
at it
don't stop,
long enough, then eventually you'll have a big win.
Yeah, and the way I look at it, and I don't think this is a fallacious way to look at things at all, but I just want to keep chasing the bad money I've put in with good money.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I'm
and the
going
less
to make
money
it
that
back.
you have, the more a small win becomes bigger.
Exactly. And the more desperate I become, the more I cherish those wins.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about, is that momentary high you get from a win.
Exactly. And I don't think that will be a problem at all.
Doesn't seem to be for really anyone.
No,
So
I've
why
not
would it
heard,
be
I've
for
not
you?
heard of anyone struggling with that. Other than gambling, just hung out with the fam. Went to downtown London, Ontario.
What was your actual reason for going there?
Just visiting family.
You have family in Canada?
Yeah, my dad's whole side of the family lives in Canada or like right on the Michigan-Canadian border.
Cool.
So I go up there as much as I can to visit.
I wouldn't blame you if you went up there and didn't come back, to be honest.
I could see myself moving to Canada one day. It's a cool country.
Seems like a very nice place to be.
Yeah, I actually have dual Canadian U.S. citizenship because my dad is a natural born Canadian who was born in Canada, and they passed a citizenship act a while ago.
I mean, they need citizens.
Yeah,
They'll
they
let
do.
anyone be a fucking citizen of Canada.
I know. The stats of Canada are crazy. Like 90% of the population is within some
It's in like
really
1/3 of the
small,
landmass.
yeah. And yeah, like anything north of like Alberta, maybe. I don't know what the northernmost city is, but anything north of that has like less than 1% of the population in Canada.
Nothing but
It's a
ice road
huge
truckers
country.
up there.
Yeah. I heard that there are more trees in Canada than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy.
That can't possibly be true.
I don't know. It's what I heard on
Aren't there like
I don't remember where I heard it, but just in our galaxy. Just in the Milky Way.
Yeah, but we're still talking like millions of stars, right?
Yeah, but millions of trees.
Millions of trees?
Yeah, easily. It's mostly trees.
I mean, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean millions, but like hundreds of millions?
Maybe. Do you want to look up how many
How
trees are
many-
in Canada?
How many trees in Canada? Oh, fuck me. Do you want to take a guess?
I'm worried I'm going to be so wrong and seem like an idiot. I'll say
for a hint that I was very
okay.
wrong when I said hundreds.
So is it in the billions?
It could be.
I'll say 5 billion.
Okay. Are you
Is that
ready?
way off? Yeah.
318 billion trees.
Jesus.
Now,
How many stars are in the Milky Way?
How many stars in the Milky Way? Okay, so that's interesting. Fuck, that's crazy. It says 100 billion stars in the Milky Way, which I would have guessed there's like
Okay.
around like, like 100 billion stars. That sounds about right.
Yeah. I don't know,
But
100 billion.
Like I'm a 5-year-old. 1 million billion.
1 Brazilian trees.
But yeah, there's 218 billion more trees than there are stars. That's fucking crazy.
So are there that many trees in the U.S.?
Canada's forests
There might
account
be.
for 30% of the world's forests.
Wow.
That's insane.
That is
I mean,
nuts.
the U.S. probably has like,
I mean,
Five trees left.
we've torn most of them down.
yeah. I mean, where are we going to put all of our Walmarts?
Yeah.
There's all those pesky trees just everywhere.
Yeah.
What do they do for us? Nothing.
What are we gonna make double ply toilet paper out of for when
Exactly.
we have blowout diarrhea?
Yeah.
From eating just shit fast food all the time.
Speaking of, I
Yeah.
gotta go take a shit.
There might be more diarrheas that have occurred in McDonald's bathrooms than
Then there are
stars
stars in the Milky Way.
Yeah. And that's an ever-growing number. That's infinitely
It's
expanding,
growing all the time.
like the universe.
Like however many births there are in a second, there's like double
Yeah.
that many shits
Yeah.
in McDonald's bathrooms.
People birthing something in McDonald's bathrooms constantly.
I think we should stop talking about this.
Other things I did in Canada. That's pretty much it.
Really?
Drank some beer.
I
Chilled
mean,
with the
when are you
fam.
not drinking some beer?
Yeah, saw a hockey game. My cousin had a hockey game. He plays in like a U21 league.
Nice.
So it's like 18 to 21 year olds.
Hell
Just
yeah.
like, hopped up teenagers, a bunch
Jacked.
of testosterone.
Yeah.
And I played hockey, for a long time. And I don't know I can't remember what my games were like around his age, but it was the most violent game of hockey I've seen in a while.
Really?
Yeah,
I
'cause
feel
they're
like that's
just-
Canadians.
Partly, yeah. I've played a lot of Canadians in hockey, and usually, yeah, they can be aggressive.
Have you played Canadians or Canadian Americans?
Canadians, I would go up to Canada often and play hockey as a child.
We have had very different lives.
I know. I had it's a weird part of my life. I was so into hockey. But they basically played the body every chance instead of the puck. Like they would prioritize a big hit over getting the puck. And a lot of fights broke out.
That's exactly how I would play
And,
hockey.
yeah, it was fun to watch. And
It'd be fun to participate in too.
yeah. I ate a lot of Tim Hortons.
Nice.
I love Timmy's.
Dude, fuck. The only time I've ever really known of Tim Hortons was in Trailer Park Boys.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to go so bad just because of that.
It's great, man. I love Tim Hortons. They have very decent coffee for like being a fast food place. Good donuts. And I don't eat meat, so I'm really like on their food menu, like capped out at egg sandwiches. But their egg sandwiches are pretty
You eat
remarkable. Yeah,
Nice.
I just started eating eggs again.
How's that?
It's
love
good.
hanging
I
with
missed eggs. I liked eggs. They're a good breakfast item. I don't need a ton of them, but I just felt like I needed some more protein every once in a while. So
Totally.
put eggs back in the rotation.
Eggs are very high in protein.
Yeah, they're good food. Yeah, but I wish we had Tim Hortons around here. I'd love it.
Yeah, I would love it too, based on how they do it in Trailer Park Boys.
And Canada just has a thing with like bakeries and baked goods and donuts. There's a bakery across the street from where my aunt lives called Spicer's. Shout out Spicer's in Lambeth, Ontario. That's like one of the best bakeries I've ever been to. So I'd go through there like every morning and buy half a dozen donuts and eat most of them.
I feel like, I don't know. I feel like the whole rest of the world just fucks with bakeries and pastries and like
Yeah.
that good shit in a way that we don't. Because everywhere I've been like very pleasantly, and coffee too for that matter. Like in Mexico, which I was not expecting to find like amazing bakeries or pastries in Mexico. There was so many, and the coffee was insane. And like Sweden and Iceland, like bakeries everywhere, real handmade stuff,
Yeah.
And then like Canada, they've got that shit. We just like the equivalent of that for us is like a frozen Starbucks chocolate croissant. Like
Yeah.
Why?
We
Why don't we
really
got
need
the
to up our
goods?
game. I
And our
know.
coffee is just not that great either.
No bueno.
No.
Yeah, it's unfortunate what we prioritize in this country.
Yeah, protecting rapists like fucking Jeffrey Epstein. No one ever talked about that.
Yeah. Wait, I think this could be a good lane for us, actually. I think we've discovered something that hasn't been...
We're going to cover it in depth, but from a not factual perspective, because we don't know anything.
Years after the incident.
Yeah.
But from what I've gathered, there's some suspicious play.
I think that there was some weird stuff, like, at the very least, some weird tax shit was going on.
Yeah, at the very least.
How you buy a whole island. Like,
yeah.
Johnny Depp has an island, too.
Yeah, and... What do Johnny Depp and Jeffrey Epstein have in common?
They probably both hit Amber Heard.
Yeah, that's it. And they're both in Pirates.
Epstein hit her when she was like a kid, and then Depp hit her when she was like a grown woman. So
that's a circle of life.
That's
for
life.
Most Hollywood actresses.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Sorry. Yeah.
Anyways, thank you for listening to our Jeffrey Epstein segment. Join us next week
you should
for
make
more
like
Epstein.
A little reel at the bottom.
Yeah, I will.
It's like, this is
Animation.
the Epstein moment.
Yeah. I think YouTube
Brought
will
to you
add
by
some...
5 Gum.
Yeah. 5 would be sick as a podcast sponsor.
They would be sick,
I used to
dude.
love their commercials.
I used to love their gum.
Yeah, I still like their gum.
I don't really like gum anymore. It hurts my jaw.
It just makes mine stronger.
I think I don't know. After a while, this side just hurts.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
I feel you.
I grind my teeth in my sleep.
I was chewing gum on the way over here.
Dennis said I grind in my sleep. He's real as fuck for that.
Yeah, dude. We're all about that grind set. Mm-hmm. This is also not only a Jeffrey Epstein podcast / music podcast / internet talk show, but also a grind sets, money, financial advice, health and fitness podcast.
Yes. So if you need advice on the grind set, here's some free advice. Step 1, never stop. 2, grind. 3, never stop, never stopping. 4, grind. 5, take advantage of everyone around you and give little to nothing back. That's a very important step. And then 6, grind. You'll get there.
Really simple, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Julian and me. We never stop grinding.
Sacrifice all your morals for the bottom dollar.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Ruin your relationships and compromise your entire belief system to obtain more Bitcoin.
Yes. Or Dogecoin.
Dude, that's my favorite thing on Instagram is finding those dudes who are like day traders, and have their Instagram is just them like,
yeah.
Taking selfies and like turtlenecks with nice watches, talking about like grinding.
They write like
and
finance books where it's like a sentence that's like chapter 1. In order to grind, you must first blah blah blah, and then like 4 blank pages for you to like take notes on.
I just saw one and it was a dude who's like, the difference between me and you, I never stop working. When you're out with your friends having fun, I'm working. When you're sleeping, I'm working. When you're having sex with my girlfriend, I'm working. They didn't actually say that last one. But
I wonder what they're doing. What kind of job can you find that's 24 hours a day?
That's what's so funny about these guys is none of them work or have like they're either day traders,
like making content for Instagram.
Exactly. They're either day traders or they're just like full-time video editors. And like for them, grinding is like editing the video they're talking or they're creating at that moment.
Yeah.
And it's like
it is a grind, but also
it is a grind,
they could stop doing that and no one would notice a difference and the world would keep turning. Whereas if like nurses were like, fuck this, I'm gonna stop the grind, then like there might be a problem with that or something. But I think we would be fine if the influencers, the business influencers, didn't grind for a little bit.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I mean, I don't know. I think at this point the world demands content and someone has to fill that void. And that's what we're doing here at Podcadzo.
Yeah.
Speaking of the grind set, I have a very important question for you.
Okay.
Who's your favorite drummer? Which one is
real smooth segue?
Has put in enough time and has grinded enough to be good and someone you like?
I decided I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey here.
Okay, great.
We're going to talk about a lot of drummers. And then we're going to ultimately land...
But who's your favorite?
We're going to ultimately land on my favorite, and it probably won't have any connective tissue back to any of the other shit that we talked about.
Good.
Really, at pretty much any one point in my life, I've had a different favorite drummer. So it's a really hard question to ask. I'm sure, like, you have a similar thing for guitarists, probably. Like, 10 years ago, you had a favorite guitarist who's probably not your favorite guitarist right now.
Yeah.
But they're still, like, on the list somewhere. You know what I mean?
Indeed.
Everyone's important. So all that to say, my first favorite drummer ever was Larry Mullen Jr. from U2.
Nice. That's a great answer. My favorite drummer, probably.
Really?
Let me think about that while you're talking.
There might be some others on this list. But essentially, when I first started drumming, and when I first started seriously drumming and putting like all my pieces together and like starting to like formulate how drums actually worked, I played a lot of U2 songs. Mm-hmm. And at the surface, all that shit is like super like simple and straightforward. But when you play it more, you realize that there's a lot of like subtlety and a lot of like just weird nuance to Larry Mullen's drum parts that make them like actually pretty different from what like a conventional drummer would do. So fucking Larry Mullen is great for that, and I think he deserves like slightly more credit as moving the drum scene forward because he was just always quietly innovating from like a production standpoint and a playing standpoint to make drums more interesting. Secondly, Trey Cool from Green Day.
Hell yeah.
This guy was big for me because I feel like learning how to play his shit in Green Day songs elevated my playing because, you know, back before I started like taking lessons or doing anything really legit, I just learned how to play drums by playing along to songs in my headphones. And so playing along to Green Day and like actually trying to play exactly what Trey Cool was playing taught me a lot about like playing fast shit, playing fills, and kind of just like breaking up verses from choruses because I feel like Trey Cool has always been really good at those things. And then next on the list, we got Taylor Hawkins because even though I was never a huge Foo Fighters fan, I would always listen to the Foo Fighters a fuckload because of Taylor Hawkins, and he also like moved drumming forward in a lot of ways. Like he took what would be conventional rock parts and just made them slightly more nuanced or slightly more characteristic to what his style was.
So
he also made Concert Toms cool again.
May I interrupt you here and ask a question on Dave Grohl versus Taylor Hawkins?
Okay. Dave Grohl is on my honorable mentions list because I have one of those too.
Great.
But I think for me, it's just a taste thing. Like, I do love Dave Grohl's drumming. I think Dave Grohl gets a little bit more credit as being like a good drummer than like actual good drummers like Taylor Hawkins. Not to say Dave Grohl's not actually good, but like from a technical perspective, like Dave Grohl's playing is like all passion and like all balls. And Taylor Hawkins has like a lot of finesse and a lot of like actual groove and like feel to his parts, where I feel like Dave Grohl doesn't have that as much. It's more just like one speed, one volume, and he is groovy as fuck. And he does have moments in his drumming career that are amazing, like the Queens of the Stone Age album, Songs for the Dead. Drumming's on that is amazing. Or Songs for the Deaf, sorry. And then like the Them Crooked Vultures album, his drumming on that is insane. But Taylor Hawkins just has like that attitude and like that style, that flair that Dave Grohl has, plus like a little bit of technical precision that I think just makes him more able to write slightly more like nuanced drum parts, and they're more like interesting to like the drummer's ear or just anyone who likes more challenging rhythmic stuff. So yeah, I think that's why I would say Dave Grohl's not on the list. But who is on the list? You're going to like this next one. Phil Selway from Radiohead.
Nice.
So
expected that one.
Pretty much, and I tried to make this as chronological as possible. as soon as I got over like being super into Trey Cool and like Taylor Hawkins and that like faster, louder rock, I got into my Radiohead phase, which lasted for like years and years and years, where I was just like obsessed with Radiohead and everything that they did. And Phil Selway was part of that obsession. Like, he also, I think, doesn't necessarily get enough credit for pushing drumming like forward and making it more interesting without making it more like just like cram full of notes or technicality. His parts aren't like overdone and they're not like overly complex. They are like straightforward and playable, but they are all incredibly unique and like one-off. And I feel like a lot of his parts are parts that only he would write. And he also challenges a lot of the like Radiohead kind of notion of like counter rhythms and polyrhythms and all that shit. Like, he plays into that in a really big way. I feel like he's part of the reason why Radiohead started being so interested in like, you know, different like rhythmic concepts and like pulse changes and polyrhythms and all that garbage. And then after that, Nathan Camarena from Chon, who pretty much exactly the same thing. Like, he just brings drumming to the next level where like all of the parts that he plays are like almost directly like countering the notions of guitar and bass. And like, it's not just like he's a rhythm drummer. Obviously, like, he keeps the pulse in all the songs like a drummer would do. But that's pretty much it. Like, nothing else that he does is really like linear or repeating, and it's all very like jazz influenced, and it's just fucking sick. Like, he just crams a lot of different ideas into very short songs or passages, and he does it in a way that is very impressive from a technical perspective, but I don't think there's like too much like flair on it.
When I saw Chon, I was just mesmerized by him all night, like locked in.
Yeah, like he
on
just
the drums, which rarely happens.
He moves straight from section to section like impeccably well, and his timing is so good. But at the same time, like, none of what he's doing is really playing into like the direct driving rhythm of the song. It's like, it's always drums are like a texture that's added to that, which is a totally different way of adding drums to songs, I feel like. And then next, Andy Stack from Wye-Oak, because I think Andy Stack was...
Great name, Andy Stack.
And he's also, dude, he's fucking badass. Like, I'll get more into like what he does for Wye-Oak in a sec, but as far as like his drumming at this point in my life, after I was like done being obsessed with kind of like the jazzy instrumental prog universe, like Andy Stack and Wye-Oak was a perfect like culmination of everything I liked up until that point. Like, they have some heavier stuff, not necessarily like any fast stuff, but they have polyrhythmic stuff. They have a lot of drum focused stuff. They have a lot of I think just focus on like groove and being super locked in because it's just the two of them. And then Andy Stack also just like literally he plays drums with like half of his body, and with the other half of his body he's playing keys or synth, and being like a third member of the band essentially. And I just feel like it's almost impossible for me to be fully locked in and fully grooving unless I'm only focusing on drums. So for him to be able to do both at the same time is just insane. And then Jason McGurr from Death Cab for Cutie.
Nice.
He is just really unique. Like, he writes really interesting drum parts that are very, again, just like non-conventional, but he also does exactly what like every Death Cab for Cutie song needs. He's never just like, oh, you're gonna pay attention to the drummer. Like, his parts are always complex and thoughtful without like being showboaty or like pulling your attention away from the rest of the band. So he's probably the first drummer I listened to where I really was like, wow, this guy really cares about each individual part that he's writing. Like, you can tell he puts effort into making all his parts super different, making them not like line up necessarily with what the rest of the drumming world is focused on at the time. And again, just very focused in like jazz or like classical, like funk and soul kind of background. And then Glenn Coach from Wilco. Again, at this point in time, he's just, again, like a perfect culmination of all the drummers that I've been obsessed with up till this point. He's super progressive. His kit is insane. He grooves incredibly well. His style is incredibly unique, and he also pushed drumming forward in a lot of ways. Like, he was one of the first mainstream drummers to really start including like tinier percussion and auxiliary sounds, or just weird cymbals and effects, like full time into drumming, not just using it as like a party trick, you know, once every now and then, like building that extra soundscape into drumming on like a regular basis for Wilco. And then Brian Devendorf from the National, his style is just like unmistakable. Like there's very few drummers in the world where if they play, most people could instantly recognize like, oh, that's that person. I feel like Brian Devendorf is one of those people.
In my mind, there aren't too many bands where if they did not have the drummer they have, they would be a totally different band and probably not as successful. But the National are absolutely one of those bands where his style is so much part of every song and so integral to it. And I mean, not, you know, I'd say obviously most bands with great drummers, if you took away the drummer, the band would be way, way worse, obviously. But just as like bands that where the drumming contributes so much to the songwriting in a way, he's up there.
100%. Yeah. Like if you just took away that kind of like classic thing that he does, breaking up the kick and the snare into like 2 and 2, and like that constant driving eighth note, if you took that away from like any classic National song, it would definitely not feel the same, or they probably would have written it differently. Like the guitar parts would be different, the bass part would be different. Yeah, he's again like a perfect example of how technical proficiency doesn't mean shit compared to just feeling amazing and doing exactly what a song needs. Because again, his shit is accessible and playable, and I don't think any drummer, you know, with experience would listen to him and be like, oh, I can't do that, or like I would never think of that. But at the same time, no other drummer plays remotely like him, or really even comes in that territory that he's in, and he's been there comfortably in the National for so long, and yet it's not like tiring, it's not old, it's not like gimmicky. It feels good every time he does it. So, and if you listen to the National, I feel like you know exactly what I'm talking about, so that just proves my point even more. And then next, Chris Bear from Grizzly Bear.
Nice.
He's fucking amazing too. I won't talk about him too much because I feel like this is already going on for so long.
Wrap it up.
But I truly love Chris Bear. Again, he incorporates auxiliary and smaller like timbre-based percussion into like his drum kit full time. He also writes some of the best polyrhythms I've ever fucking heard, and I think he is a huge part of the reason why Grizzly Bear feels so atmospheric and kind of progressive. Where again, like if Chris Bear wasn't playing drums with the Grizzly Bear guys, they would not sound remotely like the same band. And then next, Larnell Lewis from Snarky Puppy, and Larnell Lewis is in a bunch of other shit too, but I know him best from Snarky Puppy. I think he might be like the best drummer of all time from like a technical standpoint. And also just from like a flow standpoint and a comfortability standpoint. Like no one looks more comfortable playing drums than Larnell Lewis. It truly seems like second nature to him, and he can do like a bunch of very impressive technical shit that like I could never do, and he does it and makes it look very easy. He also is really good at incorporating like jazz influence into other types of music. Like obviously Snarky Puppy is a fusion band, so they're not just like straight swing jazz all the time. There's a lot of different styles kind of melded together, and I think he's really good at applying like a jazz standard to all of those different types of music in the fusion world, while also making like different styles also seem comfortable in that kind of jazz universe. And again, he's just a fucking machine. Like if you watch a Larnell Lewis solo, I'm pretty sure you would also think he's like the best drummer of all time, because what he does is just impossible to keep up with or like even process from like a brain level sometimes. It's just like, how the fuck did he just do that? And then Dave King from The Bad Plus, just another classic jazz drummer who I think uses the kit in a lot of ways that a lot of drummers don't and probably never will. Like he plays cymbal stands and the hi-hat stand like an instrument. He'll use his hands. He'll, brush his palms against drums. He'll hit cymbals in a way that I've never seen anyone hit cymbals before. Like he won't like strike it, but he'll just push his stick into it and swing it up and down like very aggressively, but also like with a very good amount of finesse at the same time. And again, he just brings a lot of styles into jazz that are super interesting to me. Like he'll throw rock in, he'll throw like bossa nova in with jazz standard. Like he's just all over the place and very unique as like a jazz drummer and unafraid to like push the drum kit itself into uncharted territory. And then this guy probably should have been a little bit higher up on the list as far as like timeline wise, but one of the biggest drum influences on me of all time would definitely be Riley Breckenridge from Thrice. Riley just does a lot of huge fills and like very, very powerful drum hits that I think like a lot of the reason why I play the fills that I do and try to incorporate like the hugeness in the drum fills that I do is directly because of Riley Breckenridge. He also will like hit cymbals on accent notes like with guitars and bass, and that's something that I also do a lot, I think directly because of Riley Breckenridge. He also does fills like partway through grooves where like a groove will start and then he'll do a fill and then finish the groove, which again I do a lot because of him. I pretty much stole my style from Riley Breckenridge. And for a long time I really thought that he was, and I still do in a lot of ways, think that he pushes the drum kit and the production of the drum kit the farthest out of any like rock drummer in this day and age. And also is probably the most underrated because no one really on the day-to-day like mentions Riley Breckenridge or, you know, credits him with really anything. But I think he deserves a lot of credit for the evolution of the sound of the drum kit and the importance of like the snare drum in the mix of a song, or just the way that cymbals can be used as way more accent-driven timbre than like just pure rhythm keeping metal. I think he takes like a really inventive and unique approach to his drum part writing, and a lot of the way that he writes his drums is directly influenced by like how Dustin is singing or how like Tepe's playing lead guitar. So I think that 99% of drummers would really just be like, I'm going to try to lock in with the bass, make something that feels, you know, fucking punchy on 1 and 3 and call it a day. But Riley does a lot to accent what Dustin is singing, or like how Dustin is singing, or how Tepe's lead guitar is playing from a rhythmic standpoint. And he just uses every part of the kit to like its fullest potential. So
hell yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Very for almost no preparation, that was a very impressive summary.
We're not done.
Yeah, okay.
I'll go through the next 3 really quick. Jay Postones, Ray Hearn, and Nick Yashin. So Jay Postones is from Tesseract. Ray Hearn is from Haken. Nick Yashin is from Sumac.
Those are my surprised 3. There wasn't a Sumac.
Those are my 3 favorite like prog metal / just noise metal drummers, and I group them together because I don't really think I take any influence from like prog drumming or like gent drumming or like even metal drumming at all. I don't really play anything like what the metal dudes are doing, but I think overall, I mean, to be honest, like Nick Yashin from Sumac is the most inventive with the drum kit out of any drummer playing drums right now. Mm-hmm. He gets sounds out of the drum kit that I didn't know were possible. He makes rhythms that I didn't know humans could make. He polyrhythms over himself. Like he'll lay a 4 over a 7 over a 9 and do all 3 at the same time. He'll have entire sections of Sumac songs that are just cymbal hits and nothing else, and it's still like compelling as fuck. There's, you know, long drawn out noise sections in Sumac where he's just rolling on toms, and it's still like incredibly captivating. And just the way that he counters rhythms, you know, like repetition after repetition after repetition all in one song is insane. And then like Jay and Ray from Tesseract and Haken are both just like drummers who I think are right now the best at doing like the gent / prog kind of thing where it's purposefully, counter rhythm, purposefully kind of doing its own thing comparatively to the rest of the group, I guess I'll say. And also just uses like a shitload of auxiliary, like stacks everywhere, fucking 10 cymbals, fucking 20 toms, like shit like that. And then John Theodore from Queens of the Stone Age, who's the runner-up. He is the best rock drummer of all time alive. I would say it would be Taylor Hawkins, but,
rest in peace.
Rest in peace. So I think John Theodore probably, at this point in time, is the
Mars
best.
Volta too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's probably the best just rock and roll drummer that we have right now. His technique is impeccable. His drivingness is incredible. We just saw him a few weeks ago, and there wasn't a single song that they played where I wasn't just fucking moving my head, and that's just because of John and Mikey, the bassist. But they lock in together incredibly, and I mean, to fill the shoes of so many great drummers in that band: Joey Castillo, Dave Grohl, fucking others that I'm forgetting.
Yeah.
But to fill all those shoes and still take it to the next level and build yourself like a characteristic, unique sound and have people stoked to see you specifically in a band is a huge thing. And then, final answer. Can you guess? Probably not. You might not even know his name.
Give me a hint.
He's got a very unique setup.
Neil Peart.
No, but he is on my honorable mentions list. Okay. Daru Jones from the Jack White live band, plus a bunch of the Jack White solo albums, plus Ruzik Records, plus collaborations galore. Daru's played with so many different people. The reason why Daru is my favorite drummer is truly because I feel like he is a combination of all the drummers that I just mentioned, summed up into one guy. You want a heavy rock song, he'll do heavy rock. You want hip hop, he can do hip hop better than any drummer alive. You want reggae, he'll do reggae. He can do metal, not like he does metal, but he can do metal. And a lot of the time when Jack White and his band would jam live or just go from song to song live and noodle on stuff, they would throw in little metal riffs or little country riffs or little jazz riffs, and his ability to just switch on a moment's notice is nothing like I've ever seen. He's fast and he's clever and he's creative and he's got a very unique style and approach, and he's just everything he does is exactly what a song needs from a drummer's perspective. He never steps on anybody's toes. He never gets in anybody's way. But he's always the most interesting thing that's going on. If you can be on a stage with Jack White and Quincy McCrary and Dominic Davis, and you can still be the most interesting thing that's happening, I feel that speaks volumes to your talent and your uniqueness. So Daru Jones is the fucking man. If you don't know him or if you haven't seen his setup at the very least, check out his setup. Watch some videos, listen to some interviews. He's got his own record label. He's a hip-hop drummer. He is a rock drummer. I think that now that Jack White has kind of shown how truly brilliant this guy is throughout the years, I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the most sought-after drummers for collaborations in the future, because, his hip-hop groove is insane. He's the grooviest motherfucker alive, and his rock drums are driving and loud and interesting and stylistically always makes the right choice. So I think he's the fucking man. And then honorable mentions, super quick: Chad Smith, Red Hot Chili Peppers; Danny Carey, Tool; Michael Cavanaugh, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard; Dave Grohl, we already talked about; Forrest Rice from the band Covet, another prog band; and then the guy from Black Midi, I don't know his name. Yeah. And Stella Mozgawa from Warpaint, and then Carla Azar from Autolux and some Jack White stuff as well. Shitload of drummers.
Very impressive, Julian. Well done.
Thank you.
You know a fuck ton about the drums and drummers.
Too much.
Fascinates me, honestly. All right, I want to do two things from here. First, I'm going to just, with no preparation and off the top of my head, rattle off a couple drummers that I consider my favorites.
Go for it.
You can ask me about any of them. I won't explain as I'm listening. But, and then after that, I want to throw some drummers at you who are kind of like, if you ask people who don't know much about music, name a drummer, the drummers they would name, and I want to get your opinion on them. Okay, so my favorite drummers, in no particular order, and just off the top of my head. And I might miss people, but and again, no particular order. Matt Cameron, Phil Selway.
I should have put Matt Cameron on my list.
Phil Selway, Topper Heaton from The Clash, and Matt Cameron, I should mention, is from Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, a bunch of other shit. I would have left this off until you mentioned it, but it is a big one for me too. Trey Cool from Green Day. I said Topper Heaton from The Clash, right? Yeah. Topper. Chris Thompson from Vampire Weekend. Stephen Morrison from New Order. And I'll do one more.
Not Larry Mullen?
Larry Mullen would absolutely be one of them. Larry Mullen Jr. Is there anyone else I want to mention?
Wait. I should have written this down. I'm not gonna. There's no point. Say it again from the beginning.
All right. Matt Cameron.
Okay, let's talk about Matt Cameron really fast.
Okay.
Is it because of Soundgarden or Pearl Jam or both?
Both. Primarily
his drumming in Soundgarden is fucking phenomenal.
And then I knew, like, I was aware of Matt Cameron being in Soundgarden first and thought he was amazing in Soundgarden, and didn't learn until later on that he had replaced the drummer in Pearl Jam eventually and came in. I was like, it's amazing how he could change his style enough to fit so well in Pearl Jam and be arguably Pearl Jam's best drummer. There's also
100%.
Yeah. Who else? There's Dave. What's his name? Drummed in on the first album on 10.
Last name.
Dave something. Whatever. And did Jack Irons drum in Pearl Jam too for a little bit?
I think so.
Dave Abruzzi.
I think the internet went down.
Fantastic. All right, well, that's fine. Doesn't matter too much. But anyways, but yeah.
Yeah, the internet definitely went
So
down.
you would agree that Matt Cameron's the best drummer in Pearl Jam?
But I think, not to like spend too much time talking about this, but I think his drumming in Soundgarden is what made me fall in love with him as a drummer more, because he just let it all hang out on the Soundgarden albums. Especially, I mean, I always talk about Down on the Upside being like my favorite one. Mm-hmm. And I think that his drumming on that record is a lot of the reason why it's my favorite, because it really is just like super fucking like punchy, almost like attitude filled drumming, like spicy, saucy shit. No fucks given.
So after Matt Cameron, I had said Topper Heaton from The Clash.
Okay, why him?
He was one of the first times. First, I love The Clash. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. And he was one of the first times as like a young music appreciator that I really paid attention to the drums and what he was doing. And I think he's a classic case of like one of those drummers that is so loose and free, but also very precise, and adds like a massive driving force to the band. So yeah, big Topper Heaton fan, and his large range of styles. You can play like classic punk rock on like the more ska, reggae, Clash songs. He has such a nice groove.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just a great feel overall. So Topper. Oh, I knew there was one I was missing. And this might be a point of contention. Tony Carroll, the original drummer of Oasis, who was actually kicked out of Oasis for not being good enough at drums. But I think he's
fucking douchey enough.
Massively underappreciated.
Oi, cunt! You're not good enough at drums, cunt.
He was the drummer for Definitely Maybe on the first Oasis album, and it was a problem in the studio. They were having to redo a bunch of his drum parts or fix them and post.
Just sloppy or what?
Yeah, he couldn't play to a click, sloppy, off tempo. But I think as a live drummer, he was fantastic. If you watch the early live Oasis performances, and he was the perfect drummer for them at the time. And I really don't think people give him enough credit for like defining kind of the Brit pop drum style, like songs like Live Forever or Rock and Roll Star. His style and the drum sound on those songs are like, I think if you were gonna say like what is the classic Brit pop drum track, it's his Live Forever drum track.
Okay.
So Tony Carroll. I'd also mention Larry Mullen Jr., Trey Cool, Chris Thompson from Vampire Weekend.
Who's not a drummer.
What do you mean?
He wasn't a drummer.
He literally was not a drummer before, but he's a drummer now, right?
Sure, he is. Yeah, he is now, I guess.
Yeah.
But
I think that's what's...
You arguably like him
because
as a
he
drummer
wasn't a drummer.
Because he wasn't a drummer. He would take a very unconventional
he learned how
approach.
to be the drummer for Vampire Weekend.
Like on the fly.
And again, one of the first, like, as an early music appreciator, one of the first times where I was like, wow, these drums are really standing out to me. Because, like, I was into guitar and singing and stuff. Yeah, so I was like, wow, this is, like, totally different. And
when
I'm like, really
Cousins came out as a single, I was like, these drums are fucking insane. Because he's literally just hitting a snare the whole time, like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, totally.
That's it.
All right. I want to ask you now your opinion on the basic drummers that everyone knows and loves. Okay.
I was going to say, we almost went this entire episode without mentioning Lars Ulrich.
Okay. Yeah. He would be one.
Now's a good time to just say once and for all, Lars Ulrich is not a good drummer. It's okay. It's okay to like Metallica, and it's okay to like Lars's drumming, but you have to acknowledge that he's not a good drummer. And if you think that he is a good drummer, you're just fucking wrong.
And he's a bad person.
He's kind of a little drama queen, kind of a little bitch. But, I mean, that was old Lars. Maybe now he's different.
I'm sure he's chilled out now.
He's not a good drummer, and he's got poor time, can't keep time very well. His fills are not creative or original. He's been doing the same thing for 40 years. Minus on St. Anger. His drums on St. Anger are very, very good. But I don't think he can play any of them live, so he's not a good drummer.
He's so mechanical and no feel. Even if you watch him, you can see that. Yeah. He's like tense.
And things,
I don't know fuck about playing the drums, so probably not fair for me to say that.
No, you're 100% right. He's got very poor technique, which is why he gets fucking sweaty after 2 songs, because he's literally stiff as fuck and like can't do anything besides move his entire arm. Songs that deserve like actual rhythmic drive or like precision, he is not capable of delivering that, and that's why Metallica has always fallen flat as a band overall for me, is because that extra thing that they need to make them driving or interesting, they don't have. Except for on St. Anger, where he actually plays like driving drums that are good and rhythmic and still kind of unique and original and good.
Okay, some of these are going to be drummers that I wanted to mention in my list, but I thought I'd save them for now. So first, I'll try to go in some chronological order. Ringo Starr.
I love Ringo Starr.
Okay, I thought you did.
I think that Ringo Starr, I mean, this is obvious, but if Ringo Starr didn't have exactly his style, then there probably wouldn't be rock drumming the way that it is today.
Yep.
Pretty much everyone after the Beatles just wanted to sound like Ringo Starr, minus, I mean, like the Led Zeppelin people that fucking hated the Beatles. But
Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones.
I did like Charlie Watts. I don't think that he necessarily... Like, this is going to sound unfair. He didn't necessarily, like, do anything to push drumming forward, other than being in one of the biggest rock bands in the world at the time.
I think that makes sense. And I think he was like a reluctant rock drummer. He was a jazz dude and like a jazz purist.
Yeah.
And from reading Keith's book, it like took a lot of convincing to get Charlie in the band.
I think that was the reason why I liked his playing, was because it was a good like culmination of that kind of like newer like house jazz that was happening in like the 40s and 50s, and then like the rock that kind of adapted a lot of that stuff and ran into like a different direction. I feel like he had a lot more focus on trying to like have some like nuance to his playing, but it's never been like my favorite.
Yeah. Keith Moon from The Who.
Fuck Keith Moon.
Okay.
That dude gets too much credit for doing too little. Fuck The Who in general.
Oof,
I know that's gonna hurt.
Yeah. I love The Who.
I know you do.
And therefore
I know that pretty much everyone except for me loves The Who.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just not, like, why? I just, like, same with fucking Oasis. Like, why? Why? Like, I hear it and I just don't get it. It doesn't click.
All right. John Bonham, Led Zeppelin.
I love John Bonham.
Okay.
And John Bonham and Ringo Starr together, them both being kind of like the two most influential drummers of the time, but on different sides of the spectrum, their culmination in the middle is like what all modern rock drumming really is. Like the swagger of Ringo Starr and like the flair of Ringo Starr, but with like that technical drive and, you know, precision. Not necessarily like it was focused on being technical, because obviously Led Zeppelin wasn't a technical band or by any means, and they weren't like super tight or like you know, like produced to a fucking T, but like Bonham's playing was incredibly technically precise, and every note that he played with like incredible amounts of intention.
So here's why I like.
He also invented like the triplet bass drum thing,
I've heard that.
Drummers have used ever since.
Here's why I like Keith Moon, and it's why I like John Bonham too, is I think there are no better guitar drummer pairings out there than Keith Moon and Pete Townsend and John Bonham and Jimmy Page. I think as like a drummer guitar pairing who were so locked in with each other, their styles complemented each other. It's hard to come up with like better examples of those guys.
Totally. And I just don't think, for me, I mostly think that it's probably just because I'm not a big fan of The Who or like Pete Townsend specifically. But I don't know, like Keith Moon's drumming just never really did anything to me besides, play into Pete Townsend's bullshit, which I always fucking hated Pete Townsend. So
all right, that'll be another episode.
But Bonham and Jimmy Page, like 100%, and even Bonham and John Paul Jones, like they were like the first like powerhouse rhythm section, I would argue, because like, I mean, McCartney and Ringo were very rarely doing the same thing at the same time. They were not usually on the same page. True. It was more like drums were the trinket on top of McCartney being like the rhythmic driving force. Whereas Zeppelin, it's like, you know, John Paul Jones and John Bonham together were like the fundamental of Led Zeppelin. And then Jimmy Page could do a lot of stuff over the top of that. And Bonham had the ear to outline and highlight those things that Page was doing, while also holding down the rhythmic fundamental with John Paul Jones. And that's why they're the first and the best power trio of all time. Like, there will never be another group with like that natural chemistry, I feel like. Maybe not never, but there hasn't been one since, I don't think. Like, if we're talking purely power trios, like, they're just so powerful. And like John Bonham's instinct to add that extra rhythmic drive behind bass was like obviously just instinctual, because no one had thought to do it before, and people have been trying to literally copy it ever since. So yeah, Led Zeppelin's pretty much the fucking best.
They are the best. All right. Tommy Lee from Motley Crue.
Not a big Tommy Lee guy. Think he's a douche.
Yeah.
Think everyone in Motley Crue is a fucking douche.
All right. And I think last drummer, Meg White.
I love Meg White. I think we've talked about this a little bit.
I knew as much.
And this is kind of why I didn't put her on my list, because I think, if I remember correctly, we did already do like a whole rant about people being wrong about Meg White. Maybe that was a different podcast.
No, that was our White Stripes or Jack White. So.
But yeah, anyone who thinks Meg White is a bad drummer or didn't do enough. I mean, I know I said Lars is like a bad drummer because he doesn't have the technical ability to like keep time. But like, I think Meg White, in a lot of ways, might be better than Lars Ulrich because she seems like she can keep time better than Lars Ulrich can.
Yeah. And
she might have a more sparse drum part. Like there might be less technically happening than in like a Lars part, but she's actually playing it more on time with Jack, and like they actually have more of a like locked in group dynamic, whereas when Metallica plays as a group, it's like here's 3 dudes plus Lars doing whatever the fuck Lars is doing. So try to just think of it that way. Like she might not be technically the best drummer, but she always did exactly what every White Stripes song needed, and she was always exactly where Jack White like needed her to be. So it doesn't get any fucking better than that. And since we're here talking about just like really big drummer names or whatever, I do think we should talk about Danny Carey for a second too, just because he was on my list of honorable mentions, but we didn't really talk about him.
Neil Peart and Danny Carey were two that I was going to throw out in my drummers that people would name, but since you already mentioned them. But yeah, let's talk about Danny Carey.
So Danny Carey pretty much, I think, pushed like prog drumming forward in a lot of ways, but I also have always just felt like he doesn't necessarily have too much like passion behind his parts. He's always just trying to think of like what is technically the coolest part or like technically the most impressive part to play, but it doesn't always feel like there's like passion or soul in it. And it's always just like surgical. His drums are very surgical. And that's always kind of how I felt about Neil Peart too, which I know is a very unpopular opinion. And I'll preface all this by saying I fucking love Rush. I'm a huge Rush fan. And I love all the different eras of Rush. Like, I know a lot of people shit on like 80s and 90s Rush, but I think that's like my favorite era of Rush. And it's because of Neil's, well, not just Neil's, but like all of their group effort to mix like the classical rock elements with like a more progressive and like futuristic sound and like the 80s synth wave and all that crap. I think that's where my favorite Neil drumming happened, was when he kind of let go of the notion of trying to be like a progressive rock drummer and really just encompassing like what that meant for the application of drums across different types of music. But he's always, again, just had like a surgical approach to doing that. So it's always felt like more about putting the right notes in the right spots and making sure everything happens at the right time than it has been about like feeling great for what the song needs. So great drummers, incredible drummers that have like changed a lot about like prog drumming and the way that people approach playing drums, but just don't have that like special sauce that like, you know, the Daru Joneses and the Riley Breckenridges have that I look for when I'm listening to drums.
Do you want to know who my favorite drummer of all time is though?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Julian Ferrer.
That's you gotta get out more, my friend.
No, I'm serious, dude. They're a great drummer. And this was a timely discussion to have today because we're going to track some drums right after this.
Yes, sir.
I think we should maybe wrap this up and start doing that.
Yeah, I gotta do a lot of stuff before we can get there.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to tracking drums. Any blast names you want to throw out? Things you've forgotten? Closing remarks?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that covers it.
I'll throw one out who's always been one of my favorites that I forgot to mention. And this is really a pairing. It's Andy Rourke and Mike Joyce, the drummer and bass player from the Smiths.
Sure.
I think because Johnny Marr is such a groundbreaking guitar player and because Morrissey is the persona that he is, they kind of overshadowed the Smiths, but Smiths would be nothing. They would fucking suck if they didn't have such a tight rhythm section.
It's true. What's the bassist name?
Mike Joyce.
Mike Joyce.
And he recently passed away.
Oh,
rest in peace to him.
Shit. I did not know that. He was one of the first like bassists that I listened to, like especially when my dad would play the Smiths growing up. He was one of the first bassists that I listened to where I was like, oh wow, bass can be more than just like root fifth. Like he actually wrote bass parts.
Yep.
And then shortly after that, I got super into Colin Greenwood from fucking Radiohead, who also writes some of the best parts of all time. And I always thought that their bass playing was pretty similar.
I've never drawn the connection, but I agree. And both of them, hard to find a place in a band with a Johnny Marr or a Johnny Greenwood where their guitar is so fucking
also
innovative and amazing.
Perfect.
Yeah, but like most bass players be like, all right, I'm just going to settle into my space, provide a backing
Let the
for
lead do the lead thing.
that dude for that dude to do his thing. And but yeah, both of those guys, like you can mute the guitar and vocals on either of those and listen to bass and drums, and it'd be
still
fucking amazing.
very, very interesting.
Interesting and listenable.
All right, let's do this again, but
we'll
with
do a
guitar
one later on. I'll have to prepare to match how well you summarized
I
your...
just frantically wrote down a bunch of
it was
names onto a
impressive.
Google Doc.
I'll do that.
Do it.
And we'll come back in a couple episodes and talk about guitars and guitarists. But to close this one off, drums are good.
Drums are good. Drums are cool.
Drums are cool.
Drums are fun. And if you think that you can't do anything new and exciting with drums, well, you're dead wrong, buddy.
You're wrong.
Because I got a list of people who have been
And
innovating for over 50 years.
Loser.
And you smell like shit.
Freak.
And I'm gay.